Thank you. I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7 p.m. We'll take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd also like to thank our Jefferson AV students that are here helping with the broadcast tonight, Jonathan Manduano and Rod Waddell. Thank you for being here. I'll have the coordinator call the roll.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Rollins.
Here.
Mr. Scrivano.
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Here.
Mr. Siegel.
Here.
Mr. Connor.
Here.
Mr. Escobedo.
Here.
With 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the petitions and communication portion of our meeting where we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communications portion of our agenda. According to the Board Policy 2.230, the public comments portion of the meeting is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it's appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. In order to allow sufficient time for the business of the board and to conduct our meeting in an efficient and sufficient time, an effective manner, we are requesting that you comply with the guidelines that are posted, and each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. It's not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would be otherwise confidential in such open meetings. 2 names will be called at one time, the one whose turn it is to speak and the one who is next. If you're the second person, please come to the front and sit in a vacant chair. I also want to point out that we have a clock on the wall to help you with your 2 minutes. We thank you for your interest and your cooperation with our guidelines. We have 3 speakers tonight. The first speaker is Alex Custers, to be followed by Allison Wang. And if you'll hit the button on the microphone to turn it on, should be there you go.
Like that. How do I start the clock? Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to come here and speak. My name is Alex Custers. I'm a sales manager and partner of Impact Networking in Rockford. And I'm here to comment on IFB 16-68, the multifunctional copier project. Impact's been servicing, our technicians have been servicing equipment in Rockford Public Schools for 18 years. And we had the opportunity to bid on some of the new equipment that's being refreshed. If you've reviewed the bid opening document, you'll notice that Impact had an option on there that was considered non-responsive. We feel and believe that we were responsive in that option, and that the board should reconsider. We weren't given an explanation as to why it was considered non-responsive. I also would like to echo the comments of the gentleman from RICO who spoke in the last board meeting, who suggested that the board consider a 60-month option as opposed to a 36 or a 3-year option. Just looking at some of these numbers, I think the board, with a plan to have a 3-year term with a 3-year option or a 6-year plan, by looking at a 5-year with a 1-year option, could realize a savings of upwards near $1 million. And I think that money could be attributed to other projects like air conditioning for the schools. I think a 6-year plan is reasonable. The project for the online textbooks that was discussed in the last meeting was also a 6-year plan. And I think it needs to be brought to the attention of the board and also the citizens of Rockford. And then also for the board to consider the existing lease obligations and the equipment in the schools before they move forward with this. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Allison Wang, to be followed by Dennis Ritt.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that everyone is enjoying the start of a new school year. And so everyone in Rockford received this postcard here from our state senator, Steve Settleman. It states, Rockford area students will benefit from an additional investment of more than $7 million when they return to this school year. This year's plan fully funds education and will result in $6.5 million more for Rockford Public Schools. This is certainly something to be extremely grateful about. So now I would like to bring your attention to the following elementary schools. Ellis Arts Academy, 95% of students fail to meet minimum state standards. Lewis Lemon Academy, or Lewis Lemon Elementary, 94% fail minimum state standards. Westview Elementary, 92%. Bayer Elementary School, 91%. King Elementary School, 90% fail. And so this minimum state standard reflects the international standards of industrialized countries. If we want to bring the real economy back to Rockford, then we need to work harder. I implore the board to use this extra $6.5 million on these students directly for learning. Let's use it to reduce class sizes or even just have more reading specialists and tutors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ritt.
Thank you. Thanks for seeing me again today. Quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what we talked about a few weeks ago, but there was another analysis done, and I've got both of them right here. I spent a great deal of time doing hours and hours of analysis on this project, and the information that's contained in these analyses is not accurate. I won't get into details, I don't have the time for that, but I'll give you one example. There's a scanning mechanism that was put in the machine so students could scan the cards. Our price was $31,000. In the analysis, it says it's $57,000. That was the one that was done after last week. So there's some flawed analysis here. I'm going to give you just a real briefing on my position. Again, I spent a lot of time analyzing this. As a taxpayer and as a major account rep for Ricoh USA, our equipment is prepared to and built to specifications that last a minimum of 5 years. If you were to lease a vehicle, you're going to pay more for a 3-year lease than you are a 5-year lease. I think everybody knows that. And it's no different with multifunction machines. If they're built for 5 years and you sign a 5-year lease, you are going to save tens of thousands of dollars with a 5-year lease. What I'm asking the board to do is to reject vote no on the recommendation, resubmit a proposal for a 5-year lease and a 6-year lease, RFP, and then let the cards fall where they may. That's my request. I think it makes a lot of sense. I can guarantee you that you will save tens of thousands of dollars if you do that, and I will leave my last 20 seconds on the table. So,
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Again, we thank you all for your interest and your cooperation in our guidelines. We'll move on then to board member comments. Are there any board member comments at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on then to consent items. The following consent items are the meeting minutes of August 9th, 2016, accounts payable and payroll, purchase orders, contracts under 10,000, construction bid pay request log and travel, bid recommendations for IFB 16-68, the multifunction copier equipment, the recurring contracts for Circles of Learning, the addendum to the assessment contract with Northwestern Evaluation Association, the recurring contract with Peg Koch for services in support of 2 federal art grants, the certified speech and language pathologist from Advanced Medical, certified special education teacher, Cumberland Staffing, Bayer, the fiscal year 17 Northwestern Illinois Association contract, and the special education private and residential placement contracts, and the other consent items including workers' compensation settlement agreements for NS and MR, and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve these consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration?
Yeah.
Mrs. McCullough.
Under recurring contracts, excuse me, B as in boy, and F as in Frank.
Okay.
And G.
Mr. Rollins?
7A.
The coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the consent items not pulled.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Okay, I will now take a motion and a second to approve bid item 7A, which is the IFB 16-68 multifunction copier equipment bid recommendation.
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Connor, second by Mr. Rollins. Discussion or questions? Mr. Rollins?
Well, simply because we've had people ask questions about it or comment on it, I wanted to give the administration a chance to simply give some background as far as the process and why you made the decisions you did as far as this particular procurement.
Okay,
Hi there. My name is Tamara Pugh, and I'm the Purchasing Process Manager here at the district. We actually consulted with our Executive Director of IT. We did some research as far as what other districts are doing as far as 3 to 5 year, and actually there was a range. Some did 3 and some did 5. We chose the 3 year due to technology changes, the different needs of the departments that change, and we felt that this would be the best fit for the district.
And I'm sorry. And to add to that, additionally, if we were to look at a 5-year lease, then of course that would be additional interest that we would be paying. And so that's why we had the 3 years plus a 3-year option to where we could, in essence, have the copiers paid for in 3 years, and then the remaining 3 years would be just the maintenance cost associated with that. And then additionally, I just want to back up and share a little bit of history about this project, because this project has almost been underway the whole entire 3 years. Tamara and I have both been here.
okay.
We put out the first piece, which was the managed print services. We put that out for RFP because our whole intent was to, of course, reduce our fleet, because we have just about every type of copier, printer, fax, scanner, risograph that you could ever even, I didn't even know what a risograph was before I came here, that you could ever even begin to imagine. And so, in looking at the cost, we knew that there is large opportunity here for us to standardize equipment, for us to have the best equipment, for our school buildings as well as our administrative departments. And so we put the RFP out to have someone come in and help us develop the specifications. Now, actually, this is pretty big business, as you probably can begin to imagine, because no company wanted to participate and do only the RFP if they were not also allowed to bid on the copier equipment. So in putting the specifications together, we put specs together that were extremely generic, meaning this many pieces of paper in the tray and it'll make 30 copies a minute or whatever it is. And we actually gave a plus or minus 10% range, because we know that different vendors may have machines that go 35 pieces of paper a minute versus 40, etc. So we did put this out for bid with the understanding of the fact that we wanted them to tell us what type of equipment that met the standards, as well as we also wanted specific how much per copy for black and white as well as for color. And based on the estimated volume, that's basically how we came up with the calculations for the maintenance agreement side. And the lease amount is the lease amount. I mean, that's pretty straightforward in terms of what was put on their bid offer form. See, there's a question.
Ms. McCulloch?
Actually, I was going to ask Mr. Connor if this must have come through Ops Committee and what the conversation was there, and some of the questions, and if they were able to answer some of the questions that we've heard tonight about, somehow numbers being incorrect, or just whatever you guys had to tell us.
Yeah, well, it's been a while now, so you're relying on my memory, but basically, yes, it did go through ops. There were actually a number of questions that were asked on follow-up I sent several. Some of the answers given tonight is what I was told, because I did ask about the 3 versus 5-year lease, and I was basically given the information that was just presented. I think one of the things I will say is, in terms of hard numbers, and I heard a very large number tonight, one thing I will say is that, with all due respect, that kind of number, had somebody sent me an itemized on how that number got about, I would have looked into it. So I'm going to tell you something. These are not easy decisions. We do a lot of work on it. And I think I would respond much more positively if there was some kind of background on this that could have been given. I asked about both the technology behind it, the calculations, and all the assumptions. And I admit I don't know it like the professionals who do this, but what I'll say is that from what I could see, and I looked at it, and it was brought before ops, if there was a lengthy discussion on this and there was some real questions, I think that would have been brought up before. And I know the one gentleman showed here before, and we did follow up, and I asked those specific questions, felt that they were answered. So one of the things I'm going to say is that these bids are a lot of money. We know that. We try to support local business, but this was a process that's been going on for a while, and I know personally I can't argue the details because I don't know it like you. So we have to depend on the technology department who approved it. We have to depend on the finance department who approved it. So in the end, if this were a corporation, I'd have the same answer for you. Is that we had a process, and we can't make everybody happy on this. So what I'm going to say is I felt the process was open. I felt that actually the finance department in particular, when there were questions, they responded. So from my point of view, the process was held, and to be honest, in the original, there was issues about how the RFP was done, and it was redone based on those comments. So I think there was a response. So what I'll say is that at this point, we've had a lot of scrutiny on this, and I feel like due diligence was done, and that the result before us tonight looks to be a lot of attention was paid to it. And so I'm going to have to stand by it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Now to have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of item 7A, the multifunction copier equipment.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 absent.
Ms. McCulloch, you want me to do any of those separately or together or separate? Okay, so I'll take a motion in a second for item 8B, which is the addendum to the assessment contract with Northwestern Evaluation Association. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Ms. McCulloch. Questions or discussion?
I just thought Mr.
Yes.
Schroeder could share with us, we're adding 9th grade basically is the piece of this, right, for like 27,000, and I'm just wondering why we didn't have them initially, why we're adding it in, and is it considered a recurring contract if we're doing an addendum to a contract we already have, Ms. Hoagley? Just making sure.
Yes.
I'll address
Yes.
the question about 9th grade.
Yeah.
So with the conversion from ACT to SAT this year, and the lack of data for students coming into 9th grade, the high school administrators and Dr. Wolf and I discussed having MAP offered for 9th graders to help guide some instruction and measure growth over the course of the year. We had these conversations after our instructional council originally decided to go with MAP for K-8. So we brought it to the instructional council after that decision for agreement, and that's why this is an add-on to the original contract.
And they never had any conversation about ninth grade when you
We
originally?
didn't. No, we didn't. Not the original proposal from our assessment steering committee was for K-8. And then the people in the room discussed a little bit about ninth grade. The conversion from ACT to SAT gave us a little more incentive to have this measure for students in ninth grade. And in the future, if we so choose to have MAP for ninth graders, it will provide a continuum from eighth grade to ninth grade, and ninth grade teachers will be accustomed to the data.
And so the piece of it that I guess I'm not understanding is why it makes a difference with the change from ACT to SAT, because that's a
Sure.
11th grade.
It is. Our SAT suite, the SAT suite includes eighth and ninth graders for this year. So we're bringing that proposal to the board next meeting for a first reading. We lack a universal screener in high school. We lack a way to measure students' progress on a nationally normed assessment in high school. We have that and have had something like that in our elementary and middle schools for the past years. We don't have that in high school. So the way for our ninth graders to hopefully be assessed in the fall, and also for us to build in some skill building related to the assessment in different sessions, in different classes, provide guidance to teachers in reading and math. That's the proposal for ninth graders to be administered MAP this fall and winter and spring.
And who's using STAR? Somebody presented that they were using STAR to
STAR was one of
the
our
education committee.
Yeah, that was one of our alternate settings. I think the IILC.
Oh, ILC.
Right, ILC was using STAR. We also use STAR in our middle schools. This is our last year doing so, to price kids into interventions for math. Our support for math is called Accelerated Math, and that's based on the STAR assessment. In the future, we will use MAP assessments to guide our instruction in those intervention classes.
And the same with the ILC and with Roosevelt. Everybody will be on the same.
So that's the hope.
Okay.
Yes, that's the hope. That's one of the reasons why this ninth grade proposal is in front of you, to help guide us across the system.
Any other questions, comments? Now I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of item 8B, Northwestern Evaluation Association contract, assessment contract.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Now I'll take a motion for the approval of item 8F, which is the Northwestern Illinois Association contract for special ed services.
So moved.
Moved
Second.
by Mr. Connor, second by Mr. Rollins. Questions or discussions? Ms. McCulloch,
So I kind of ask this every year.
Mrs. Cyrus. is
And
on
Ms.
the-
Cyrus is, have we done an assessment for what it would cost us to supply, to have these services supplied basically in-house as compared to having
We
the
have not.
contract?
We have not done an assessment to determine that. We've had discussions about whether, not this year, to be completely honest, we've had it in past years. And the discussion always is that the licensing procedures that are required for occupational therapists and physical therapists are very different than all of the other certified staff that we have in our district, and we feel that the services contracted through NIA gives us a more succinct. They're very difficult positions to fill. I know that NIA contracts with agencies to fill them. It's very similar to our speech and language therapists. They're very difficult positions to fill, and we've just made the decision not to bring that in. It would be an additional bargaining unit that would be possibly formed within the district. It has a whole different set of professional development needs. Those are all provided through NIA with this current contract.
But speech therapists have the same sort of licensing that OTs and PTs do. And there is a difference in the availability of OTs and PTs, just from a professional standpoint. But, every year they say, no, we haven't because, and so I just wonder, once again, I think this is the 4th year in a row, has anybody looked at the numbers on that one? And I do understand the issue with availability, but, there's some benefits, especially to a lot of people in the working force who have children and want to be home with them in the summer, don't want to be at a hospital or, in a situation where they're working all year so that they can, they have their holiday off with their children. So there is some draw, and maybe looking at the workforce and seeing what the availability is out there. I once again would just ask, maybe by the time this comes to us next year, that somebody would take a look at that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Connor?
So if you don't mind me asking to Mrs. McCulloch, is your question a delivery question or a financial question?
It's a financial question.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of item 8F, which is the Northwestern Illinois Association contract.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Now take a motion and a second for the approval of the special education, private, and residential placement contracts.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Ms. McCulloch. Questions or comments? Ms. McCulloch?
So I asked about this one because we recently chose to have the Therapeutic Day School. And because we're going to be doing students in-house and we just, determine what is the delta on the amount that we're spending for students in placement into these private day schools. I'm assuming, and I should never assume, but this is another financial question. If we have 30 less students who have to go out to other schools, how much are we going to save on these what will the savings be because we're doing it in-house?
If you remember when I presented the Ombudsman Therapeutic Day School, the reimbursement, so the district's responsibility to any student placed in a private therapeutic day placement is that we are required to pay 2 times our per capita rate, and anything above and beyond that is reimbursed at 100% from ISBE. So the cost of educating the children in all of these facilities is the same for the district. Their billable rates are different, but our reimbursement is greater for the greater cost because all we pay is 2 times the per capita rate. That's our required payment. The savings, the cost savings that we presented with the Ombudsman contract is in the transportation costs because they're significantly different between and it was approximately, for the 30 students that we are going to place this year, it was about $19,000. I don't have that right in front of me, but that's what my memory is remembering. My goal, and it has always been the department's goal, is that we don't increase the costs of and increase outplacements. So for every child we place at the Ombudsman program, it would be 1 less student that we would place in some of these other facilities.
These contracts are where we're currently at. They're not making an assumption. We're signing up for where students are at because we haven't started the Ombudsman piece yet.
That's right. So
but you did tell us that we can take students out of these therapeutic day without any financial risk to the district because that's how they work.
That is true.
Thank you.
Mr. Rollins, did you have a comment?
Yeah, every once in a while I do make this comment. Once in a long while I get the question from somebody in the community, why do the public schools cost so much more per student than private schools? Why can't they just educate kids for the same cost as private schools? And there's a number of reasons for that, and this is one of them. So, just for everybody sitting in this room knows this. Occasionally we find out there are people who watch us on Channel 20. So, this is an arrangement for special education students who have disabilities that we can't handle in the district and who need what are called therapeutic day schools. So this is a what Mrs. Cyrus is bringing to us is a summary of all of these various contracts we have with 15 different institutions. And we do get some reimbursement from the state for this, but at a total cost of $6.7 million, of which the district has to pay $3.2 million. I mean, this is federal law. There's nothing we could do about this, and these are students who deserve services, and we're required by law to give them these services, and they need the services. But this is one of the services that your public education provides. That, for instance, private schools aren't doing this. So that's my editorial comment on this one.
Ms. McCullough.
I'm sorry but could you just give us an update on Ombudsman? Because we did, in terms of when the therapeutic day is going to open out its dials, and do we have families that have committed? It just seems like an opportune time, if you don't mind.
So the last time I spoke to the people from Ombudsman, their targeted date, assuming everything goes well with they're putting new carpet and painting and those types of things at Stiles is September 12th. And every parent that we have a recommendation for therapeutic day placement, every parent that we that would fit the criteria for the Ombudsman program, we share with them that that's opening, and most of our families are saying when it opens they would like to return. So that's I can tell you we have 6 already. They're waiting for it to open. They've chosen not to start. So yes, we're going to use all of those seats. And you know, Ombudsman is working as fast as they can to get their doors open.
Great, thank you. The coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the item 8G, special education, private and residential placement contracts.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
We are now at the closed session consent agenda items, including the following. The appointment of John Fian as the 10-month elementary dean, the appointment of Paula Randall as 10-month elementary assistant principal, the appointment of Christina Miller as 10-month assistant principal, the appointment of Michael Ria as the 12-month special education administrator, the appointment of Reuben Cooper as a 12-month director of student services and alternative learning, the notice to remedy for Jody Marsh, the HR organizational report and addendum. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any items that board members would like to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, we'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins? Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
Yes, it's appropriate this evening. I have, it appears that we have the principal of Guilford and Auburn High School, and I wanted to take the moment while they are here in the audience, recognize the work that we've been doing in high schools across the district, but specifically at Auburn and at Guilford. Jay Matthews, who writes for the Washington Post, has for over a decade kept track of a statistic he refers to, that is now referred to across the country as the Matthews Challenge Index. And what the Matthews Challenge Index does, Jay Matthews has a very strong belief, and this has really been popularized over decades of research, that it's really important to evaluate not only performance in terms of scoring a 3 or higher on advanced placement tests, but it's also incredibly important to make sure schools do a great job of providing access to more and more students to the most challenging courses that are offered. And what he argues is that that leads to increased ACT scores, SAT scores, and college readiness for students. And this has been a real point of emphasis in the district for the last 5 years. We've dramatically increased access to students, and as a result, we've seen significantly more tests passed as well as tests taken. Matthews, the way his metric works, it's relatively simple. You take the total number of tests taken in a specific school and you divide it by the number of graduates. And if you get above a 1, you're doing really well in terms of providing access. And there are literally over 800 public high schools in the state of Illinois. There are tens of thousands across the country. And two of our high schools have recently achieved a very lofty status in that Matthews Challenge Index, scoring significantly above the 1.0 threshold. Auburn ranked 11th in the state of Illinois. So out of 800 high schools, they were 11th in that metric, and Guilford was number 61 in the state of Illinois in that metric, both placing in a very high level nationally as well. That means that our teachers, our staff, and our leadership at the building level with support from the district is really emphasizing access. I think the board's investment in a 7-period academic day, I think an emphasis on providing intervention for students, not just who are struggling, but providing that access has really helped. And there's going to be some good news coming up with, again, it's embargoed, but we're going to have some positive news coming up with ACT scores to show that connection that Matthews believes is there is actually starting to make a difference as well. So kudos to Janice Hawkins and Jennifer Lawrence, who are here in the building. They're here to talk about another project, but both of their schools and their faculty really deserve to take a collective bow. That is really exciting stuff. And I do not believe Kelly Monson is here this evening. I think we had a communication breakdown, so we'll talk about, and that was on my part. So we'll talk about committee structure finalization, but I think we're pretty close to there. If you have any feedback on committees, just send that to me electronically. But I thought because they were here to talk about Edmentum anyways, we should, which is a very different proposal, I thought we should celebrate what they're doing to bring rigor and access to the most rigorous courses to students throughout the district, and that is certainly having a positive impact. We want to drive pass rates to an even higher level, but access is also a very important construct as well. Thank you.
Move on then to committee reports. Ms. McCullough, the Education Committee report.
Education Committee met on Tuesday, August 16th. That was last Tuesday. There were two updates. We first talked about the the annual update for the alternative learning actually happened at the previous board meeting. So instead, they focused on social emotional learning. And I'm just going to let you know what social emotional learning experiences involve: understanding and managing your emotions, to set and achieve positive goals, to feel and show empathy for others, to establish and maintain positive relationships, and making responsible decisions. And all of those help the school climate as well as the student function in life. And they went through the programs, what's happening at different grade levels, and there's a full PowerPoint under board docs. Remember, if you want to see those, you go to the library and you pick the meeting, August 16th, and you can pop that up. The other conversation was about Edmentum, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in this meeting. So I'll defer to that conversation. Our next meeting is September 20th in this room at 5:30. And I'd like to announce that we have a new committee member. Ms. Walker will be leaving the committee, and Ms. Christina Peacock is going to be joining the Education Committee beginning with the next meeting. So she showed an interest. She was one of the candidates for an open seat when we had a board member leave previously. So she's very interested in our system and has students in the school, and we're excited to have her.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Rollins, Budget and Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee has not met since the last board meeting because of the Labor Day weekend. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, September 12th at 5:30 p.m. here in this room.
Thank you. Mr. Connor, the Operations Committee report.
The Operations Committee will meet September the 6th at 6:30 in this room. And I will make one quick comment, which is the committees are where most of the work is done, so if there are bids or anything else where people really want to come and spend more time and have more dialogue, that's the venue. Board meetings are more formal, and dialogue is really not possible. So I would highly recommend any business that has any issues would use that as the venue.
Okay, we'll move on then to our action items. Our first action item tonight is the supplemental services at Kennedy Middle School for professional development and online student support with Compass Learning. That was presented by Dr. Wolf. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion or comments? Now I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the supplemental services at Kennedy Middle School.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent, excuse me.
Our next item is the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant, United at Peace, that Dr. Wolf presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this grant?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Connor, second by Mr. Rollins. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Our next action item are the eminent domain resolutions. I just want to ask the board members if they wish to vote on these together or separately. Together is fine? Okay, all right. So I'll take a motion and a second to approve the resolution for authorization of eminent domain at 1609 Second Avenue and 1623 Second Avenue.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Connor?
I know we've said this a lot, but it's always worth repeating. This is a last resort, and the board, in good faith, always goes to property owners, tries to deal with them directly, and always wants to give fair market value. So just emphasizing that point one more time.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Now I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the eminent domain for 1609 and 1623 Second Avenue.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Our next action item is the approval of the Edmentum Credit Recovery Agreement that Dr. Heidi Hui presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this agreement?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Escobedo. Questions or comments? Mr. Escobedo.
So we've had a lot of discussion on this. There's been a lot of questions. We had an opportunity during Ed Committee to do a little more in-depth discussion. And at first sight, it seems like a lot of money, but I think after further discussing, we realize that there's an opportunity here for a lot of students to, even though it's intended for credit recovery, that there's an opportunity here for future work for many other students to take advantage. From the financial standpoint, approximately $87,000 per year, a staff member, $10 per student if everyone was to take advantage. Let's say we only use a quarter of those licenses, still $40, right? So from a value standpoint, I think it's worth it. I mean, there's just simply a lot of benefit here. There's been concerns. One of the statistics that we heard in Ed Committee was that about 31% of our freshmen are off track. Off track meaning they failed at least one of their core courses. So there's a need, whether we like it or not, and this will hopefully support our schools and give them another tool to supplement their teaching environment.
Thank you. Ms. McCulloch.
So some of the additional conversation that we had was about implementation and process. And implementation was a concern because we were told there are so many avenues to use this, whether it's for prepping for standardized testing or augmenting classroom education or credit recovery or, homework. And so the concern is when you roll out something with all those pieces, where do you start? And so we have, and I don't know, I know there's a lot of people here, and so you made the effort to come out, but to talk about that there is a plan in place for how this will be implemented, and I think that I'd like on the record to show what that plan is. We've received some written information about that, but not only how it's going to be rolled out, because this is a 3-year plan, so we're really talking about the first year and kind of getting the bugs out. We want to make sure that it's done with fidelity across all 3 schools, so that, or all 3 schools, all 5? Are we going to do this at Roosevelt, or would this just be at the 4? You can answer that question when you get up. So that it's done with continuity. We have a lot of mobility in the district. We want students to be able to. And one of the things that, and I'll say I know there's other board members who felt the same, was that there are some consequences if you fail a class, to make sure that they just aren't doing everything online, that there is some instruction, that there's one-to-one, and that there's seat time. That takes away a little social time if you have to come before or after school during the day. But the opportunity is there, and we want to make that the best opportunity possible, and so to have an instructor present. And how that instruction is going to be, because we want to make sure that if it's a math, and we're starting with math, right, Algebra 1, and then the last piece that I'd like to, I'm going to ask you, and then I'll be quiet, is there was some recommendation about how it might be used by not waiting till the end of the semester, say in a math class, but being able to group students together, move, or that was just another thought. So I'm going to cede the floor.
I'll take it first, I guess.
Okay.
So we've always laid out a process for first aligning courses in Edmentum to what we currently do in our classes in school. So one of the first steps is, and we are already doing some of this, is to have our curriculum team take Algebra 1, for example, customize what's available in Edmentum so it matches our sequence in Algebra 1. So in essence, one of the first groups of students who could benefit from Edmentum are students who maybe are in Algebra 1, fail Unit 2 in the first semester, have a chance to be assigned to mandatory tutoring, mandatory being seat time, for example, having a consequence if they don't go, and then practicing their skills so they can pass that unit and recover that unit so it's not a failure on their record. So they can, in essence, keep progressing through Algebra 1. Real-time intervention, like we try to do in some of our situations, but aren't doing it across the board the same way. So that's one of the first groups to target, because we want to keep freshmen on track. And we've put in our process sheet a stipulation that, to prevent students from having outside help, since it's a web-based program, that the proficiency exams must be taken in the presence of a certified math teacher, for example, for algebra. So, in essence, we're trying to provide seat time for students, mandatory seat time. You're assigned to it, just like we already assign students to tutoring in the high school now. And they can work on what they may have missed. Maybe they only picked up part of it. Maybe they picked up a fourth of it, of the content in that unit. And then they could take a proficiency test at the end in the presence of a math teacher to earn that unit back. That's one group. Another group would be students who have failed a semester of Algebra 1, and Dr. Huey has some stats related to that, how many students have failed Algebra 1 in the last couple of years. And those students would have the same process. They would be assigned to mandatory tutoring sessions during the school day, before or after school, what fits their schedule, so they have seat time. They could practice at home. It's a web-based if they had that option. But in essence, they're participating in tutoring sessions to help them develop their skills so they can take proficiency exams. If it's a whole semester, it would be multiple tests, always in the presence of a certified math instructor. The same would go for English 9. It would be in the presence of a language arts endorsed teacher at the high school. And that's really the initial phase, is to have 3 to 4 classes approved by the curriculum department. I think we targeted Algebra 1, English 9, and Biology because those are our high failure rates, and the principals could probably add a little bit to that detail because they have individual needs in their buildings. And then after that is put in place, we assign students, we see credit recovery being accomplished in those 2 pathways. We have the option to have the curriculum team review Algebra 2 and English 10 and another science class. So we have, over the course of the year, core courses that are needed to be recovered by our students to allow them a different pathway to achieve graduation. I say a different pathway because we have other pathways. We have night school, summer school. Those are charged. The students have to pay for those. We have alternate settings. We're trying to prevent students from reaching those destinations and giving them options at their school with their teachers during the day. Using already existing structures like tutoring sessions during lunch and before and after school that we have already built in the system. I'll turn it over to Dr. Huey and the principals because they can provide a little more information in terms of numbers. But that's the overview. And I think I sent a couple longer emails to a few board members last night. I'm sure they were passed around a little bit. But that's the essence of the proposal.
And the focus is on credit recovery for 9th grade, not for seniors at this point in time.
Well, it would be both. So those classes that are offered, I think the idea would be if we have a senior who only needs Algebra 1 to graduate, we would attack that right away.
Absolutely.
And, the high school principals, administrators, and counselors have access to that specific data. We want to provide pathways for students to achieve graduation. Seniors who are missing maybe Algebra 1, English 9. Those are students, if that's all they require, would be first on the list. Because we want to support those students as they go. The capacity for the system in the buildings is between 30 and 60 students at a time, depending on the number of certified math, language arts, and science teachers who are available. And we can speak more to that in a minute. And the capacity should be limited at first. It shouldn't be this full blown out, like we're going to offer it to hundreds of students and have everybody in every nook and cranny on a computer. That's not the intent. The intent is to have it be structured and guided so we can measure the progress and then enhance what we're doing as we go along. Again, using existing structures that didn't yield any credit recovery in the past.
And the questions are being asked about process and implementation because we have done it the other way in the past and we want it to be successful. And I understand that you're thinking that the fiscal impact is not great, but if we do it right and it works, then we move forward and we help other students. And can you confirm, whoever's going to speak, to the number of tutors? Because we'll still have students for mandatory tutoring who are outside this credit recovery group. So are we increasing the number of tutors or how are we doing that? So if someone would speak to that.
Dr. Huey.
Hello. Thank you, by the way. Thank you for all the questions. I think they're great questions, and this is a really important opportunity for our students, and I think it's valuable for all of our time to be thoughtful about this process. So I'm glad and thankful for all the questions. To answer your specific question about the tutors, each one of the high schools has 3 tutors every lunch period, so there are 4 lunch periods. So it's 12 tutors in all that are already in place. And then after school tutoring, it really is dependent on how many students there can be, however many tutors we need to have after school to meet the needs of the students. So 12 for sure, and then after school tutoring, as we get this up and going, we're definitely going to need a good handful of
and that was the
tutors.
question, because we already have tutors for the students who we know kind of what our numbers are. I'm assuming there's some continuity in the numbers of how many students are sent for mandatory tutoring when you look semester to semester. So now we're adding another group in because it's a credit recovery. Do we have to staff it with more tutors? Or are we just going to stay at the same number and limit then what? How?
Well, the lunch tutors that number will remain constant because that system's already in place and the funding for those lunch tutors is already there. The after-school tutors, that's really going to be dependent on how many students we decide that they'd rather go after school as opposed to at lunch. Each one of the high schools will have to decide which group's coming at lunch, who's coming after school, because we'll have the students that can be getting real-time intervention, and that lunch period time is a short amount of time. It's only about 25 minutes, where the after-school time can be up to an hour. So maybe the after-school time becomes the time where you're in there for the mandatory credit recovery, and during lunch becomes a time where we work on skill building and intervention. But both groups of students, we want to make sure that it's mandatory, you're going.
So they don't have a choice of going to summer school or other opportunities
Certainly they could.
for their credit recovery? They do,
Certainly they
okay.
could. I think as we build this, that one of the things that we're going to want to do, and we've tried to do in the past, is have the students provide proof that they enroll in night school or summer school, so that, with a heavy focus on credit recovery, we want to make sure that students are recovering the credits that they need to be recovering. Other questions? Good. All right.
Mr. Rollins.
I only had one question, and then just a sort of a comment. But the question was, so there's a support piece to this, but then there's a credit recovery piece to this. And I understand that the credit recovery piece of it might be necessary right now because we haven't had the support piece in place, but it's the same program. So if you've identified somebody who is failing a course and they go through this program and they still fail the course, then what is the usefulness of the credit recovery piece of it after they've failed the course?
I'm not trying to understand the question. I think if I'm hearing it correctly, the students who are being intervened with while they're in the course still fail.
Right.
What's the incentive, or what's the benefit, or what's the likelihood they'll receive credit if they go through credit recovery after the fact?
I'm asking the question, what's the necessity of the credit recovery? If we put this, there's two pieces to this.
Right.
And let me just bifurcate that. So that the piece that has been talked about quite a bit is the support structure, which I don't think anybody has any concerns about. I think that's a wonderful program. I think everybody else thinks it's a wonderful program. So you identify people early on who need the support, who are failing, which is the way it should be done. You offer this program as a way to support them, okay? But the credit recovery is the same program. So if you have actually identified kids who are failing the way you say you're going to do, where does the credit recovery come in?
Well, initially, the credit recovery will come in with students who have already failed the course.
Correct.
I think what you're saying is true.
So 2 years down the road, will the credit recovery
2 years down the road, will it be a need for credit recovery on a large scale like we have right now? Hopefully not. So as we build our curriculum leadership teams for grades 9 through 12, ELA, for example, social studies, science over the next year and a half, we would have them use Edmentum as a way to intervene while the students are in the class. So you're right. Would there be a need for for larger scale credit recovery like we have right now for Algebra 1, English 9, and other core courses? No. And that's the idea, is that we want to build our curriculums with interventions in place where students can recover in the moment, instead of recover in the traditional sense after the fact.
Dr. Hui?
And I think, what I hear you asking is, a student goes through credit recovery, fails, then what? Not just the intervention piece, but the thing with this credit recovery or Roosevelt, both types of programs are proficiency based. So at Roosevelt, you keep working until you are proficient. There's never a point in time where we say you get an F, and this credit recovery program would be the same. And the way I'm thinking of it, some students may not do well with this credit recovery, but at least they now have options. Where right now, if you can't afford $175, we don't have another option. So with Edmentum, students can get in there and they're going to continue working until they're proficient. They're not going to get an F. If it comes to a point in time where the certified staff member says, you know what, maybe this isn't right for you, let's work out something so that you can go to Roosevelt or and work with them, or maybe they need to completely switch placements and go to Roosevelt or ILC 100%. I mean, it's not going to be a you get an F situation. They'll continue with Roosevelt or Edmentum until they're proficient.
I guess that's kind of new information. So if you identify somebody who's failing one of these core courses and you put them into the intervention program, they will never fail? They'll never fail the course?
No, because the intervention and the credit recovery are two different scenarios. The intervention is you're in the class, in your 7-period day, you're in algebra, and you need some intervention support that's provided through Edmentum. How a student actually does in the class, I hope that the intervention's successful for the student and they don't fail, but the reality is they still may fail. The other part of the conversation is the credit recovery part of the conversation. And with credit recovery, you don't recover the credit in any scenario, whether it's Roosevelt, ILC, or this, until you show you're proficient. Two different discussions. Intervention is real time. The credit recovery, you don't get a credit if you're not showing you're proficient. And that's true in any of our credit recovery situations in the
Okay, I guess
district.
the question I had was starting with the intervention, you've got a kid that you've done the intervention with, and it's the same program, so that it has not been successful in the intervention piece of it. Will it be successful, why would it be successful in the credit recovery piece of it?
It might not. And in that scenario, maybe they do need to be transitioned over to Roosevelt where it's a whole different structure of credit recovery, small classes, less distractions. I mean, this may not, it may not work for 100% of our students. It probably won't work for 100%, but at least we then would have other options than to say, you know, we don't have anything for you, go to Roosevelt or ILC.
Okay. My comment is, I obviously have some concerns about the credit recovery piece of this. I don't have any concerns about the intervention piece of it. I'm willing to support this based on the administration's limitation of this to 3 core freshman courses and the implementation sort of boundaries that they've put around it. I do think this is the beginning of and I hope it's the beginning of a conversation about what our philosophy is behind a high school diploma and what a high school diploma really is. I got asked the question, and I've asked some other people, what's the difference between a high school diploma then and a GED? And haven't really gotten a good response. Other than the fact that GEDs are viewed differently, but GEDs are proficiency, they're equivalency certificates. They're a demonstration that you have the knowledge equivalent to a high school diploma. But employers view GEDs very differently than high school diplomas. And as we start this conversation, I think that we need to be thinking in those terms as we try to make kids career ready. Why is it that employers view GEDs differently? How do they view them differently than high school diplomas? And I hope that's an open conversation that we have.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the Edmentum Credit Recovery Agreement.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. Our next item is the Housing Incentive Resolution that was presented by Mr. Zediker. Is there a motion, a second, to approve the Housing Incentive Resolution?
So moved.
Second. Mr. Connor, second by Mr. Rollins. Questions or discussions or comments? Mr. Connor.
Just want to say again, from the public standpoint, this is a practical step toward really encouraging housing within the Rockford School District. And hopefully, this is the start of a number of governmental bodies that do practical things to incent people to live within our boundaries and to help us with property values. So it's a great idea. And this is really putting tax money to good work to that incentive.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll have the coordinator then call.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Final action item tonight is the Frontline Technologies ASOP Substitute Management System that was presented by Mr. Zediker. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments or discussion? Mr. Connor?
Just want to say a lot of good work was done on this, and this was overdue. One of the things I think is very good, people should know, 2 things. One is that there was good cooperation across the departments, so I want to commend everybody for really coming together. I think that not only HR, but IT and finance really came together, and everybody worked on this quite well. So very pleased with that. And I think that the fact that this is software as a service is a direction we should be going in, and that's a good standard for those of you that don't know what that means. It essentially is that we don't have to house it here, which has added cost. And so again, this is a really good trend, and it's good, from my point of view, it's good fiscal management, and hopefully we'll see more of this.
Any other comments or questions? Now I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the Frontline Technologies ASOP Substitute Management System.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. We're now on to new business. Mrs. Cyrus will present our next 2 items for a speech and language pathologist and Maxim Healthcare Services.
So the good news is this speech and language contract is for up to 3 days a week, and as long as we have no resignations, between now and the end of the year, we will be fully staffed, so hopefully I won't have to come up here with another speech contract. So the first contract is for an individual person and an individual contract for speech and language therapy. And as I already told you, it's for 3 days, up to 3 days a week. The second one is different than speech and language. It's a contract with Maxim Healthcare, and it's for a certified nurse's assistant for a medically fragile student in one of our high schools. I don't know if there's any additional questions.
Any questions for Mrs. Cyrus? Not, this will come before the board on our meeting on September 13th for a vote. Kimberly Nelson is next on the Lynn Liston contract for early childhood.
Okay, this contract was developed to support 2 different programs. One, our home visiting program with the Fussy Baby implementation model, and also our preschool expansion grant to provide infant mental health consultation to our teachers and our family support staff and administrators to support the students enrolled in that program. Both parts of the contract are funded by grants, 2 different grants, Fussy Baby and then preschool expansion.
Is this a company or an individual?
Lynn is she is an infant mental health consultant.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Kim? Mr. Connor?
I was just going to say, anything that's through a grant with the name of Fussy Baby, if you're a parent, you have to love it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. This will come for a vote at our next board meeting on September 13th. Seems like a long ways away, doesn't it? Okay. Tamara Pugh, you're up next on the interagency agreement between Rockford Housing Authority and the Rockford Public Schools District.
Hi. In March of this year, the purchasing department issued a bid for maintenance, repair, and operations supplies, and it was actually board approved on the April 26th board meeting. This agreement, well, actually, Ann Johns, the procurement contract and compliance manager for Rockford Housing Authority, contacted me to see if that they could partner with the district on this bid. And this agreement would allow Rockford Housing Authority to participate with the vendors that were awarded and also receive the discounts that the district receives now. And there will be no financial responsibility to the district.
Question, Mr. Rollins.
I was just going to ask, so, people have talked about these sorts of arrangements for years. So this is a wonderful example, I think. Is there any chance that other agencies might participate?
Actually, we look to doing more of this in the future. And we actually partner with the Park District right now for our playground mulch, so we're just going to be doing something similar to what we're already doing. I think it's a great opportunity.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Connor? Or Mr. Siegel?
Yeah, he was first.
Okay.
So are these vendors that the Rockford Housing Authority is already doing business with?
They're not doing business with them all. They are doing business with some, yes.
And the business they'll be able to do as a partner with 205, it will be obviously advantageous to them?
Correct. It'll be a percentage off discount on the things that they want to purchase. And actually, I spoke with all of the vendors, and Nicholson's is very excited. They don't do any business with them right now, and they're very excited about this.
And what about the vendors who are doing business with Rockford Housing Authority
They're
already?
actually, I talked with all of them. They're all in agreement and, very positive about it, so, yes.
Okay. Mr. Connor?
Another example where the cooperation across governmental units, people talk about it. We talk about tax dollars that we spend in duplicate, and this is another really great example. One of the challenges, and I know I've said this to the operations area in general and to facilities in particular, we have things like from snow plowing to supplies and all kinds of things. And we need to look for more of these opportunities, and I think one of the things that I would challenge the administration on is to not just take this as a win, but see how we can build on this win and almost target it. I'd almost like to see something come to operations where we could have a plan of what other targets we would have that are similar to this. It seems like there's either other agencies, I don't know how the conversation came about, but really kudos to those of you that made this happen. But let's build on this one, because I think that would be the important part for me. Not just take this as a win, but build on it.
Mr. Escobedo?
So echo everyone's comments here, absolutely great. But assuming we're kind of new at this, just want to make sure that we're looking into all the legalities and ensuring that, if there's any breaks for the school sort of thing, that, for example, if we get a tax break for being education, that somehow that we cover all legalities, because we're partnering with non-education entities and so forth. So, again, absolutely great work. But at the same time, let's make sure we're cautious and we crossed all the necessary check marks to ensure we're legit.
Okay. This will come up at our board meeting on September 13th. Thank you, Tamara. Mr. Schmidt? There he is. You have 4 items for us.
With these 4 items, 2 of them are for land purchase at Kishwaukee on Caitlin for the new elementary school, and 2 other of them are for the land acquisition over at Lincoln Middle School for additional green space out there. One of these properties was actually at Lincoln that we had an eminent domain, and we've reached an agreement with the property owner, so now we're bringing this forward for you to purchase that. So these 4 properties are in conjunction, 2 for Kishwaukee and 2 for Lincoln.
Mr. Connor?
Mr. Schmidt, on these, were any of these owner-occupied?
Yes, they were. One of them for Caitlin, 601, 603 is owner-occupied. 518 Caitlin is a vacant property. And I think 616 and 624 Charles Street were not owner-occupied, but rental units.
In terms of the owner-occupied, what's our process when we contact the owners about what we're trying to do?
When we go out there, when the board gives us authorization to proceed with purchasing land acquisition, we'll have that property appraised from an outside appraiser. Once we get that appraisal in hand, we'll draft a letter and we'll send it out to the property owner that the district's intent is to purchase their property for whatever type of purpose we need to do for expansion. We put them in contact with their land acquisition consultant. He would sit there and make contact with them, present them with an offer, and then we'd start the negotiation process. And once we reached a negotiation with that landowner, then we would bring it to the board for their approval to purchase that property.
So the point is, we do spend a great deal of time on the follow-up, and if it's owner-occupied in particular, we take the time to negotiate, do the valuation, and come to agreement if possible.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
These will be presented at our September 13th board meeting for a vote. Mr. Bailing is up next on the update for the elementary school design.
Good evening. In your packet is a two-page projection of the revenues and expenses, both for the construction of the two new schools and the land purchase at Kishwaukee is on the second page. If this was a private sector pro forma, it would be called sources and uses of funds as opposed to revenues and expenses. But under the revenue category, we have basically two major areas for the construction. One is the funds from the school district, which include at the Cherry Valley site $100,000 that we knew we'd have some additional site utility expenditures there simply because of the fact that it's an undeveloped area. We currently at the completion of schematic design, and the architects are here to walk you through the latest on the plans and elevations in a moment. We anticipate two identical buildings costing $35,659,222. Our design budget is just over $2.1 million, and the contingency is a little over $3 million for a total of $41 million and $27,000 and change. In addition, because of some of the things with Cherry Valley, the village has asked us to do, they're contributing $407,000 to help defray the cost of a berm and some of the access road issues. On the expenditure side, I guess these would be what we were anticipating the costs to be, I should say, at the beginning or at the end of schematic design, beginning of design development. The site work for the two sites combined is a little over $4.6 million. Again, including that access road and the berm at Cherry Valley that the village is helping us pay for. The two identical buildings are a little over $32 million. The design contingency, we start out at 5% at the beginning of the process. We've allocated 2.2% of that, total of 5%. So we have a remainder, a little over $1 million there. The construction contingency, which won't get used until after the bids are awarded, is $1.1 million. And the design for if all the contingency is utilized, our design fees will be about $1.9 million. And then we have some specialized design expenditures such as civil design, kitchen design, the storm shelter consultant. As you may recall, we have to put a storm shelter in adequate to house the entirety of the staff and all of the students. We are retaining an acoustical consultant because we have some larger spaces in the middle of the building that we want to make sure we properly handle the resultant sound from so it doesn't impact any of the classrooms, as well as some of the collaborative spaces adjacent to classrooms. We want to make sure that those sound issues don't become problems in the adjacent classrooms. We have design reimbursable expenses of just over $23,000. That's printing, postage for submittals going back and forth, etc. And then next month, we hope to bring the proposal from the commissioning agent to the operations committee. This is what we did after the fact at Auburn High School on the Univent project, and we're going to go ahead and hopefully implement that as part of the project to not only get the commissioning agent to kind of look things over when the project is completed, but also to review the design and process. So right now, we're anticipating a total expenditure of $41,434,000. if all the contingency is expended, and of course, we always strive not to expend all of our contingency. We also have 2 additional alternate bids that we may exercise. One is just under $50,000 to go to pendant lighting at the tile ceilings in the classrooms, and then to add back 3 computer stations per classroom. Right now, we're in the midst of that whole analysis if we're going to go to one-to-one computing devices and therefore not have the computer stations other than the teacher and the smart board going forward. So, any questions about the actual construction sources of funds and expenditures?
Ms. McCullough.
I just heard you say that we were putting the road in. I thought that we were no longer going to be
Yes, we are
responsible for putting that road in. That wasn't ours.
We are constructing the road from Perryville into the site, and the Village of Cherry Valley is making a $407,000 contribution to defray that cost. The county, and I'll have Todd jump in if necessary because he's a little more involved in those negotiations. The county is going to widen Perryville to put in the left turn lane and the right turn lane at no expense to us or the village.
We still have Mr. Hoadley and IGA that we're working on with regard to that road? Because we're not going to be responsible for it.
No, as we have that in there, the $407,000 that potentially that Cherry Valley will put forward on their contribution will pay for a portion of the interchange off of Perryville, the access road coming in, and the berms out there. And then at the end of the day, where we have the IGA with them, that Cherry Valley will take ownership of that road as soon as we fully construct it, basically in 2018 when everything's said and done.
That'd be like a private subdivision developer. Once the improvements are made in accordance with the requirements of the municipality or the county or the village, then they would convey that those improvements over to them for their maintenance, therefore perpetuity, I guess. So
with that analogy in mind, do sometimes the subdivision that the county or the municipality put that infrastructure in place?
Not typically, no.
Not typically?
Yeah, the developer does
Okay.
that as part of their expense of developing the land. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Rollins.
Oops, sorry.
I just had a question on the commissioning agent. So the reason that we had the commissioning agent at Auburn was that we had ourselves parceled up that work among different contractors who then, when the HVAC wasn't working, started pointing fingers at each other. So we needed to bring in a commissioning agent to figure out exactly who was responsible for what. These buildings will be built by general contractors. So we have a project manager, we've got architects, and then we've got a general contractor. So why do we need a commissioning agent?
And the purpose of the commissioning agent is basically an inspection, if you will. They are going to, when the construction is complete, they're going to be an extra layer of inspection to make sure everything has been constructed per the plans and specifications and it's operating in conformance with those design criteria. Also, during the design process, they're going to give feedback to the mechanical engineering and electrical engineering staff of Canon Design to make sure we're doing everything in accordance with best practices for this type of facility. So it's kind of it's a little bit of an insurance policy, just like testing the soils, testing the concrete. This is an area that buildings tend to have issues in, and that's just directly related to the building occupant comfort level, so we want to make sure that we're getting it absolutely right. And of course, if there's problems, then we will go back on the contractor or the design firm to make corrections at their expense.
I guess my concern is that we put ourselves, we can have this conversation offline. My concern is that we put ourselves in a worse position because we bring in our commissioning agent. I mean, normally, my experience, it's the architects who are responsible for doing all of that. So what happens if our commissioning agent now says something different?
And that's where we have to, it potentially does become a dispute, but
Let's have that conversation offline then.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
On page 2, as you know, at the Cherry Valley site, the intention is and has always been to do a land swap with the Park District there. At the Kishwaukee site, which originally was intended to be in the vicinity of Nelson, which of course was adjacent to a public park. There was plenty of property there that we could use for playfields and things like that. When the people that were interested in the purpose-built community came to us and said, hey, would you like to move over to the Kishwaukee site, we needed to acquire more property to have the proper green space. And so on the revenue side, the school district has always had just under $1.5 million between what we were going to spend to raise Kishwaukee School and to purchase land under the Facilities Plan Oversight Committee report. In addition to that, the City of Rockford and Winnebago County have agreed to contribute up to $600,000 each. And then there's a private sector movement that has been, I think, 10% funded at this point to raise another $200,000 for a total of 1.4. So basically, nearly a doubling of our overall land acquisition budget at Kishwaukee. Right now, we basically expect to spend about the same on the land we were going to buy and have abated and have the structures demolished. And we anticipate the Kishwaukee School demolition to be about the same, so we have an extra $1.4 million to expand the site there. If there's any questions on that aspect, I will entertain those now. Otherwise, I'd like to introduce Stuart Brodsky and Carrie Van Zant from Cannon Design, who are going to walk you through the schematic design for the project, as well as some very nice interior renderings and some exterior elevations. So I will turn it over to them, and I will go change it over to their presentation.
Okay, while he's doing that, just a quick introduction. I'm Stuart Brodsky with Cannon Design, and I'm the project director, and with me tonight is Carrie Van Zant, and she's the project manager. So first, she's going to go over and spend a little bit of time talking about the process. As you know, it's been a very interactive and thorough process, so we're very proud of the fact that the district and the community has been able to participate, and there's been a lot of input and building that results in not only meeting your educational needs, but is also reflective of your community and your values of the educational community. And just a quick note, we do want to thank you for the opportunity to work with you. We've enjoyed it. We thought it's been an excellent process, and we're looking forward to sharing this with you tonight.
Good evening. So the last project update that was provided to the Board of Education was back in May. That was a summary of what we call the pre-design phase of the design process, and it had to do with a lot of architectural program verification of spaces, what's going into the building, those sizes. Since then, we've gone through the schematic design process, and we're actually in a design development process of the design. Just a highlight, reiterating what Stuart mentioned, we've met with, we had various meetings. These are only tabulating what our firm has conducted for meetings and tours and workshops with staff, community, the student population, and then we've got the various different committees that are working and involved with the design process. It doesn't include and highlight what the district staff has done to meet with additional people and additional staff members. This is a snapshot in time, so since this was put together, we've had even more meetings and user group involvement. This was a process of the schematic design, highlights some of the meetings we've had with the steering committee, who has really been the driving force behind the design. It consists of district administration, teaching staff from various schools, as well as community and teacher or parent involvement. We've got building champion at one of the schools, and so it's been a great involvement through the process. We've also met with the executive task force, who's acted as a hierarchy for the process, and reviewed decisions that have been made by the steering committee, and had provided discussions and helped determine the process as we moved along. We are in design development, as we mentioned. This is a highlight of kind of the meetings and deliverables that we'll be working on with the design development deliverable actually this week. Just to walk you through the plan, the last update, we had a lot of preliminary information. So this is the floor plan for the building. It's approximately 85,000 square feet, K through 5. Also, in one facility will be an autism program, and in the other facility it'll be a language program, and those are located in each building up in this area. North on this plan is up on both sites. Just to give you a brief walkthrough and orientation of the building, both sites, the main access is coming in from the east, and on the Kishwaukee site, the student drop-off will run along the east and south, and on the Cherry Valley site, it'll run primarily on the east and loop back around, with bus access for both sites on the north. So primary main entrance is in the southeast with the administrative wing, and just I'll walk you briefly through so you can get an understanding of the building footprint. These two learning communities on the south end are first and second grade, and these two communities on the west end are fourth and fifth grade, with third grade to the north. Third grade also acts as the state-required storm shelter for the building. As of January 1st of 2015, all new construction for schools in the state of Illinois have to follow storm shelter requirements. So this has been designed for the capacity of the school at full capacity and its staff to be able to accommodate them during an EF5 tornado situation. Then continuing to walk around, we've got receiving and kitchen area, the autism and language program, and then at the front of the building is the kindergarten program. The interior spaces, as I mentioned, the 85,000 square foot total building footprint. One of the key goals was to make the most out of the budget, and with that create as efficient a plan as possible. So we created a very compact plan. The idea is that each of the learning communities will utilize shared learning areas and pull-out spaces to accommodate student services, and those will be scheduled appropriately by building administration. And then the center areas are the shared spaces. The idea was to create a warm, welcoming environment as you walked into the building that could be open for multiple uses throughout the day. Gymnasium. This area here, although it's green, designated as green, this is all open to cafeteria commons configuration, and then a library, arts, and music. We've also got various teacher support spaces with lounges and workrooms, and we've got the various student services that are needed throughout the building located on the west end as well. So Stuart is going to show some images, starting with, just to give you an idea of the central commons area.
Okay. So we're going to first look at a couple images on the interior of the building, then zoom out, take a walk around the exterior, and talk about some of the materials. So if you were standing at the main entrance and looking west toward the gymnasium, but through these common spaces, the cafeteria and the common area with the library to the right, this is an image looking in that direction. So given that we have the opportunity to have a very efficient plan, a very centralized form, it really establishes a heart to the school, and in that it is acknowledged by bringing some natural light in through roof forms. We're going to show you what those shapes look like in a minute. One of the goals was to bring color and form and interest to the space, that this is really the first thing anybody will see and be impacted by, and it's also the center space that everybody shares in the building. So there will be elements that incorporate some seating and some gathering that bring color into the space and make it more exciting and inviting. To the right is the library. There will be both visual and open connections from the library to the commons area, and that allows the library to flex and be more accessible to the students, both visually and also through their curriculum. So this space will be a very exciting place and a very connected space for the building, and becomes very flexible in that way. If you were to turn around and walk over to the gym and then look back at that space, this is the same view. So you can see the library located in this point in those same colored panel walls. You have a view of these clear stories, which will allow views out to the exterior as well as bring natural light in again and provide some more volume in that center space. This is a one-story building, so one of the objectives was to look at a way to break up the scale of it. So because it's one story and it's long and horizontal, centralized in form, we're looking for opportunities to provide some interest and some color and some expression to the exterior. So it draws from basically about three themes: the neighborhood feel, in both industrial and agrarian themes that are in and around and surrounding Rockford. So the idea is to make these buildings related to the community and expressive thereof. So we're going to, next view, kind of tilt up a little bit and take a look down at the roof. So I was showing you views of this central space, and we just saw a view looking toward this corner. This is the main entry to the building. It'll have an open plaza. It'll be the place, the main entrance, one of the drop-off points for the school. To the right are the kindergarten classrooms, utilizing expressive roof form. And then to the left and surrounding the building are those learning communities, those grade level classroom areas and shared learning areas. The taller element in the middle is the gymnasium. So now we're moving back down to a ground level view, and then we're just going to walk around the building clockwise. So as you look toward the main entrance, there is transparency and connection at the administrative area. It allows supervision and connection to the main entrance, an open, connected main entrance, and then the expression of the kindergarten classrooms utilizing, the color is a metal panel. The gray panel that you're looking at will be brick. So the majority of the exterior of the building will be brick. We're using a couple different colors. Brick is very durable. It's a cost-effective material and allows us to clad the entire building in a cost-effective way. As we move around that corner of the building and then clockwise, we're turning around the corner from the admin area. You look along the south face of the building and you see these two elements step out. Those are the shared learning areas for those two grade levels, first and second grade. Because it's a long facade, we're going to utilize a second brick color where these two elements stand out. It allows for a little bit of a breakdown of scale to the building to make it a little more relatable to the neighborhoods and to the scale of children and human beings. And then as we continue to travel along the south face of the building toward the west, you can see as we turn around to the fourth and fifth grade classroom areas, we continue that walk around the building to the north and see the same expression of those shared learning areas in the classrooms, providing some relief to what is a pretty long one-story building. This is the northwest corner where we transition around the corner back to the kindergarten areas. And so you'll notice that what I did mention is a few of the slope roof areas will have standing seam metal roof, so it'll be a little bit more presentable of a form, and again, kind of connect back to some of the industrial and agrarian themes and neighborhood themes. And that concludes our tour of the exterior and interior of the building, so I think we're available to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Escobedo.
So, yeah, there was a slide where you show a very transparent view to the kind of the central entrance. It seems like a pretty large area. Are there any concerns with, unfortunately nowadays we got to keep all this stuff in mind. Are there any concerns with, like, for example, an active shooter environment? I'm assuming that's glass?
So are you referring to here?
No, the entrance, I think, where you showed.
In this right in here.
Correct.
So that is the administrative area. So there's a secure entrance. So this is a secured envelope. The transparency is only into the admin area itself. So transparency is another form of passive security, allowing administrators to be able to see out and make a connection so that there is visibility.
Is that a glass area?
That is glass, yes.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. McCullough.
I'll tell you, the first thing that struck me was that your entrance is so far back off of both of those drives, and we're having an autism program in one of those, and I work a lot with handicapped individuals, and just, we've got parents and the like, and just the egress, getting in and out of the building seems like an epic journey to me for some of our people who have some difficulties with that, challenges, and since that's...
So are you referring to this
Yeah.
area in here?
So, okay, I'll go back to the plan and just explain the site circulation. So I did mention parent drop-off coming in through here. Bus access and Septran access is located to the north. There are multiple points on this north side to be able to accommodate student drop-off and pickup in a scenario such as you're suggesting.
Okay. Well, that accommodates the students, and they do need to be our priority, but what about families? I mean, their access is going to be that front corner. It's not just the students that might have some, it just seems like a long walk in.
So we do have, there's visitor parking on both of the sites adjacent to the entrances within a fairly normal realm of a drop-off drive, a paved area where students can gather, and then an entry to a building.
I think the perspective that you're seeing here was developed before the site plans were developed, and as Carrie was saying, in both cases, the front drop-off drive is actually very close here. It's not, the slide that's in this particular presentation is kind of the artist concept thing well before we had any site plans developed. So at our next update, you'll see the site plans, and for the most part, that concern will be addressed. So.
For the most part, okay.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Rollins.
Those colored metal panels, how fade resistant are those? How long will they stay looking like that?
So it's a baked enamel finish, commercial grade, so they do have guarantees for fade resistance and maintaining their color resistance. We can get the specific information and provide that to the board if they'd like.
I'd be interested to know how often we're going to have to paint those.
Okay.
And my other is not really a question. It's about the architectural. It's more like a comment. So I was on the executive design committee or whatever. That's not the right word for it. But there was a lot of discussion about these common classrooms and concerns. And, we talked through those. And the decision was made to go ahead and do that. But part of the discussion also was the fact that if we're going to do it, that's a different way of teaching, and there's going to be some professional development required. So this is actually not for you guys, but for you guys over here. One of the teachers who went on one of the site visit down to the Champaign area said that, where they actually have these sorts of classrooms, what she observed was that everybody was in their classrooms with the walls closed, teaching in the normal way. So if we're going to do this, and if we're going to do it right, in conjunction with the construction schedule for the building, it seems to me that there needs to be some professional development schedule to make sure that we have the staffs of these buildings on board, ready to go, and maybe start teaching in a different way than what they're used to teaching. So I just want to make sure that's being covered as well.
And I can just address that a little bit from the beginning because I was part of the process and I was on the school visit as well. And a lot of that discussion was going to be part of the selection process with the REA on teacher selection, administration selection, to understand what the expectations, some of that training that may happen and will need to be developed to ensure that we're appropriately using those spaces that are developed. And in the two schools that we went to, one seemed to utilize it a little bit more than the other, and I think that was more of a buy-in and a leadership in that building versus the other. And so I think that's going to be an important part of the process as we develop these two buildings.
Mr. Connor?
One comment and one question. There was a lot of input to this, and I think Mr. Rollins is bringing up a really good point. I believe that there was a lot of input on this. There was a lot of back and forth on the design, and there was a lot of agreement on approach to this. And I'd like to, on the second part, at least offer, I don't know if Mrs. Granath would like to say something, but I think it'd be nice if, from the teacher union side, if you'd like to comment on the design, I think it'd be important that the teacher side would be represented in the comments. She was unprepared for this, but.
Okay. Unprepared for this. We had 7 teachers attend the site visits down in Champaign, and they all came back very excited about the opportunity to change the way that we are able to connect with our students. I think we will need professional development. We will need training in how to mobilize the furniture, and in conjunction with the lesson plans and with the technology things that are going on. But I think we have a lot of people excited about various things that we are going to be trying with possibly multi-classroom teachers, with things that we're talking about to try and move into the 21st century with technology and with our facilities. So I think we do have a lot of opportunities to change the way we do things, and this is the first step in that.
Thank you.
Ms. McCullough?
Okay, I'm looking at the kindergarten, and I echo Mr. Rollins' concern about the color and what the maintenance involved in that, but I have 2 other questions. It appears that there's windows on all the other classrooms as I go around, and I don't see windows on that brick facade, unless those little circles and triangles and squares are the windows in those classrooms. Is that what it is?
Correct. So just the ones that you're mentioning they're a little difficult in this one, and I'll move around to the front image to show you, but those are at the student level. Those are shaped windows to provide that sense of play and childlike activity for those spaces. But each of the spaces will have, not to this full extent as the end one, and it's difficult to see with the renderings, an expanse of glass. So in the floor plan, and you can kind of see it here that starts to pop between these forms. There's the expanse of windows, and they would be located in this area. So those are floor-to-ceiling, almost floor-to-ceiling windows in each of those areas as well.
Okay. And my other question about the kindergarten ones are, you said that there is metal roofing. They sort of look like barns to me, a group of barns with some funny windows in them. So I'm sure that it's my perception of this rendering. But the metal roofing, does that change? How does that impact our heating and cooling and?
The roofing and envelope requirements are consistent regardless of the roof type that you would select. So over the main portion of the building, we call it low slope, not flat roof, it's a TPO, membrane roof system. But the roof system that Stuart had mentioned above, the kindergarten, is the metal. So the components that make up that system, all the insulation requirements and that meet the energy code, are consistent regardless of the roof type that we're specifying.
Maybe it lasts longer, so we'll make up for the painting, Mr. Rollins. My other,
The assumption of painting.
I toured some of the, we did some additions and the like, and I was in the first thing that struck me, I'm going to go back to my handicap and aging population piece, but the first thing that struck me when I walked into the staff lounges and the staff bathrooms is that they put low toilets in, and I thought, we've got an aging population of teachers, and, isn't there something in this world that says that we're going to put them at comfort height? Are we thinking about those things? Because we didn't think about it in the additions that we did, so, I mean,
Staff restroom?
sure. I know that just doesn't seem important to anybody else,
Okay.
but talk to somebody
seems
with a
very
couple of
important.
total hips here, and I'll tell you it is. And so,
Just to answer your question directly, we are required to follow state requirements and federal requirements for the American with Disability Act. So all the toilet rooms as required will be accessible. And being that it's a single story, all entries are accessible. Whether the toilets are a specific higher elevation, that has not been discussed.
Mr. Siegel?
Kind of along with Tim's comment about how they're going to do the learning, or actually the teaching in the school. Has there been any discussion about the expectations of the students that when they get to middle school and they're in a traditional building and their teachers are no longer teaching in this collaborative way, that kids are going to, I don't know, be a little bit confused? Or will the teachers be a little bit confused with a group of kids who are expecting to be dazzled by the architecture, if not, if not by the collaborative teaching style?
It'll be a transition.
I mean, it will be a transition, and I think, you know, the middle school teachers may actually be very interested in, you know, what they're going to expect when the first group of kids get out of this school, because it's very different than what's going on in the other elementary schools.
Dr. Jarrett?
I've just had some preliminary, I think that's actually a really good question, and I enjoyed the humorous way in which you presented it. But I think what we're going to see district-wide and is a continued emphasis on improving instruction, and I think there's a hunger for that throughout our system and a desire to meet students where they are. And so I think we're addressing this throughout our district with interior finish upgrades. So classrooms at least will start to look different, and maybe the structure and the flexible spacing won't be there. I think there's going to be a real consistent commitment to professional development and innovation that occurs with teams of teachers. And I think there's going to be a real district emphasis on that. I think when we start talking about some of our plan to upgrade technology and access, I think there will be more commonality, and I think these newer buildings will not be, by any stretch of the imagination, the only reason innovation occurs, but they will contribute to innovation, and I think we will use them as innovation spaces. It'll give us an opportunity to try things and invest in research-based practices that we can potentially export throughout the district. I know Mr. Schroeder has got.
I'll also argue,
ideas.
after being in every building, and since May, I'm shocked at the number of collaborative spaces that exist that we do not use. So I was at Ellis today, and as I walked down Ellis, I noticed large collaborative spaces. I was at the new Marshall Elementary School the other day. Again, large collaborative spaces that could be utilized based on a model maybe driven by new designs, maybe driven by professional learning, maybe driven by new technologies brought in. But the idea is that we have a lot of great spaces in our schools that exist with new finishes and upgrades, new professional learning for teachers, understandings of where to meet kids where they are. We're closer to those consistencies than you probably think if you just look at things in a different light. So I'm really, really, really excited about the possibilities as we move forward to a new school design, but also utilizing the spaces we have in our existing schools.
See, thank you all, and I think Mr. Bailing will be back when he has another update for us at some future time. So thank you for being here.
Yep, thank you very much.
Ms. Hoadley, you have our last item tonight.
Sorry.
Mr. Connor.
Quickly before they go, I want to give a thanks to Canon Design, the team of here in the facilities group. This has been a long process, and the one item I would stress is this was very collaborative, and there was a lot of interaction, and I would say, again, really good job on this from the standpoint particularly of bringing various constituent groups. And in case you didn't notice on the list, it was everything from teachers to students to various parts of staff functions, including food services. I mean, it was just absolutely complete, and I think the teachers had a great deal to say about this. So I really want to say thanks for effort on everybody's part.
Mrs. Hoadley has our
Yes,
final item tonight on the preventing bullying, intimidation, and harassment policy.
All right, so this is a requirement that you review every other year, the bullying policy. The bullying policy does reflect current state law. It prohibits bullying, including cyberbullying, so all forms of bullying. And it requires prompt action on the part of administration and staff members to investigate and address reports of bullying. It also requires the superintendent or the superintendent's designee to help the board evaluate the effectiveness of the bullying policy and the outcomes of the bullying policy by analyzing and certain data. And that data would include the frequency of bullying, the types of bullying that have been reported, observations of staff and student regarding school safety, and bystander intervention or participation in any type of bullying activity. Finally, the policy requires us to post on the website the board's analysis of the bullying policy. And so I would anticipate that this analysis would begin at the Ed Committee. Ms. McCulloch?
Okay.
And I'm sure Ms. Hyde Carter could assist with this too, in providing the data.
And how often does it have to come?
Every other year?
Every other year.
Every other year, right?
Yes.
So it has to be built into the schedule then?
You got to put that on the calendar.
We don't have it in.
All right.
Mr. Connor?
When I read through this, the one question, and you brought this up, is there a sense of who that designee is going to be? That was a pretty good assumption, yes.
Yes, I believe Ms. Height Carter is who I
Okay,
will
that would be
designate for that
doing
work.
this, okay.
I think it ties in very well with her work, leading us through the handbook process.
All right, and the other part was then that I assume that when we get the decision support software and all that, is that where we're going to track our stats? Those, or do we know yet? If
I
that's
think we
even
need further
necessary?
discussion, and that's something we can discuss in the next 3 weeks and bring back.
Okay. As always, I'm curious about
question.
metrics and how we're going to
Absolutely.
record it. Yep, okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Hoadley? And if there is no other further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor, second by Mr. Rollins. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 8:56 PM.
Back under the 2 hour.
Okay.